everybody, and welcome to the UK Crime Book Club on Facebook. Hopefully you're all joining us tonight. I'm Claire Allan, and I am here to talk to my fellow Avon authors, Simon McCleave, and the woman of the night, Helen, whose latest novel, The Last Girl Today, I'm going to just wave about, is out this month. This all started, actually, Simon and I did a Crime Book Club feature earlier this year when our books came out, and we were asked to recommend a book that we'd read recently that we really loved, and we both sort of went, One for Sorrow by Helen Fields, and Sam was like, I can't believe you made that book, I love that book. And afterwards we were having a wee chat, and Sam said, I wonder would Helen come on and talk to us, and Simon and I were like, yeah, we're going to get her on. So we are delighted tonight to be joined by the wonderful Helen Fields. Helen is a phenomenally prolific writer, and not only that, she has a history in criminal law and family law. So she's had a remarkable career. She has worked as a prosecutor and in defence in all sorts of different courts. She's done court martials, she's done family law, she's done Crown Court. There isn't anything about the law this woman doesn't know. And she has an extremely, extremely twisted mind, which is actually lovely. She published her first novel, correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, please, in 2019. And that was the first of the Perfect series, where we met D.I. Luke Callana and Ava Turner for the first time. In the years that have passed, Helen has published 11 novels, with The Last Girl Today being her 11th novel. And it is a standalone, although you will spot a familiar character in the mix. And it's brilliant. I read it and I absolutely loved it. I read it mid-house move when everything was insane, and it got my attention. So that proves how good it is. We're also joined by the insanely prolific, I couldn't believe actually when I looked at your history, Simon McCleave, who this is his latest book, The Dark Tide, which is I think the first in the Anglesey series, if I'm correct. Simon, you published your first novel in 2020, and there's 17 novels since. I counted on your webpage. I thought I was doing well, but it's phenomenal. And your history is in script writing and script edit and stuff, and you've worked on some fantastic TV shows, Silent Witness, Teachers, The Bill, many, many more. And now you're making up stories in print, in novels for us, and it's just a phenomenal rate. So I am delighted to be joined by you both. I suppose I should probably introduce myself. I'm nowhere near as prolific as these guys. I published my first thriller in 2018, and my 7th thriller is due out in January of next year. But I do have a total of 17 novels behind me in different genres. So welcome. That's my waffly bit done. I am delighted to have you both here and to have fellow Avon authors joining us. I think we're quite a wee powerhouse, and we have a great publisher who I think personally is picking some of the best talent from around the world. So Helen, we will start with you tonight. And Simon, this is, as you know, we talked about this is very, very casual. So anytime you want to jump in. Cool. Helen, how do you feel about the last girl today? Sorry, coming out. Nervous?
I'm gonna do the same thing. Twinsies. Yes, hello both of you. So nice to be here and with two of my very favourite other authors. It's so lovely. Yes, Last Girl Today came out yesterday. I'm going to say my first book came out in 2017, only because I'm actually much slower and I published a lot fewer books than the two of you. So I'm a baby compared to both of you so far. Yesterday, it's always terrifying. All the plans I'd made changed, as they always do at the last moment. And then I was stuck in a car park and somebody had illegally parked their car and just jumped at 9. And so I couldn't get out for 2 hours. And it was chaos. But I think that's just the way of life, isn't it? You know, that's the thing. You kind of go, oh, it'll be publication day and, you know, it'll rain flowers and everything will be. And then it's like, no, I can't get off the train, can't get on the train, car park. Anyway,
Yeah.
but it was fine. It was lovely. It's funny when publication day pops up because you've worked on a book such a long time ago. So much has happened. You've inevitably, I mean, if you're Simon, you've written another 300 books since then. But most of us, we've written at least another one, and we're working on the one after that. So it's a bit of a weird thing because you're suddenly thrown back into the world where you immerse yourself back in that book.
Yeah.
And that's quite nice actually, because for you, you've walked away from it for a little while. So great fun. It's shall I give you the 1
Give
minute?
us a little bit of a rundown. Yeah.
So I'm going to do that. So it is, as you can see, set kind of, there's a lovely beachy cave and a little figure of a girl on there. It's set on the Isle of Mull. It features its first person. I haven't written another first person book before, so that's quite interesting. And it's set on this island where a teenage girl is going missing. And what's happening is a private investigator from Canada, Sadie Levesque, is called in to go and find this missing teenager who inevitably, and this is not a spoiler, turns up dead. And thereafter, my Canadian PI spends the rest of the time on her island battling the police, battling the local people, really battling herself in some ways and her own clients to try and find the truth. And it's all set around the real, genuine myths and legends and history and geography of Mull. I made none of it up. It's all what's written in the history books in terms of the witchcraft and the legends and the sea caves and that sort of thing. So it was an absolute gift to write because, frankly, I had to use my imagination. Not at all. It was all done for me.
Well, you had to imagine that the people of Mull were, a bit creepy, really. And we have to say, you do make a point of saying in the book they're actually really, really lovely.
I apologised for that because the problem is when you write any work of fiction that's a crime novel, you have to drop your character into a position of conflict. The only way to get conflict was to take the utterly lovely and gorgeous and welcoming people of Mull and make them something a lot more edgy and closed-minded. That's the only place really at which I kind of varied the island. And yes, I have apologised at length. No one takes offence.
Simon, I jumped over you there. You were going to say something.
I was just looking at the book today and looking at the reviews and the pitch and stuff. And why did you? What's the connection with? Canada. Why have you chosen a Canadian protagonist? And why a PI rather than going sort of the traditional route of police officer?
So it's the family whose daughter is lost are American. They've come over from America, and they want to find someone outside of the island, outside of Scotland, who they feel is utterly independent. They're not getting no joy from the police. So it's their 17-year-old who's gone missing. The police are doing their thing where they say, look, teenagers disappear all the time. Teenagers get cross, they storm off, or they think there's an adventure, or they find a boy. And so they're getting no joy. So they bring someone in who they think they can trust from outside the island. But actually, partway through the book, we discovered there's a much better reason why they want someone independent and not someone from Scotland. And it's all to do with their own family history.
Ah, cool. Okay. Sounds good.
But I'm delighted. Are we allowed to name the character that appears that readers of your Perfect series will be more than familiar with? Because I just loved seeing him in it, actually.
I know. So Lance Proudfoot, who anybody who's read the Perfect series will know is Luke's old buddy. He's a journalist. He's a motorbike riding, kind of gentle but honestly spoken, very sweet soul. And when Sadie's on this island and looking up the history, she finds a newspaper article written from a previous murder years and years earlier, and looks up the journalist who wrote it to see if he can talk her through it. And it turns out to be Luke Kallanach's friend, Lance, who is an absolute joy to write. He always has been, but it was so nice. It's lovely to be able to do that little crossover thing, partly for me, just as a writer, partly because I knew that readers would like that. And also the pathologist who's in Last Girl to Die is the pathologist who pops up for the first time in One for Sorrow. So there are two characters who come into this from the other books. I mean, obviously, you know, kind of there's a realm of disasters along the way, but they're good fun to write. And as a writer, it's really nice because, you know, just occasionally you get to drop those characters in, and you don't have to work too hard in your own head to reestablish them because they're like old friends coming in. So they're kind of, you know who they are, you know how their voice is going to sound, and that makes it easier to write those characters.
I think readers will get a massive kick out of that as well. I think that whole thing of crossing over series is like, it's exciting for the readers, isn't it, to kind of cross the two over? So it's a great idea.
I think it builds a wee sense of community too, doesn't it, amongst readers? You know, when I'm reading somebody's book and I recognise a character, as I did reading this, and I know a message too when I spotted Lance in there, it just feels like, oh, we're all in on the same secret, we're all in on the same experience, and that is lovely for a reader. I love that. It must be hard though. I mean, and Simon, I don't write a series of books. All my books are standalone, so I'm always in awe of people who do write series, because some people, I've heard people say, oh, it must be easier, you're going into the same characters all the time, but you're having to sustain and grow those characters over however many books. And I suppose I'll ask you both, when you both started writing any of your series, do you have a sort of beginning and end of the journey you want to take your characters on throughout the entire series, or do you just work on a book by book basis?
Simon, you go first.
No, because I wrote the first book just as a kind of complete sort of pitch while I was working as a teacher, in the idea that, you know, my mum and dad would probably buy it and that would be it. So I had no plans for a second book. And I mean, there is a sort of, I have a story that goes through all the books about a backstory, but that just kind of became instinctive, so that each book that went on, I sort of went, this story can keep running just in the background. So no, in short, I sort of wing it, and sort of stuff pops up that I kind of think that could happen now, and that would be a really good kind of personal story that might go over 3 or 4 books, but I certainly don't plan ahead in any meaningful way, really.
And what about you, Helen? Are you a planner, or do you just fly by the seat of your pants?
No, I've got no idea what's happening, not in my own life, not in the book life, from one day to the next. It's chaos. And when I wrote the first book in the series, well, you don't know it's going to get published is the first thing. And then, you know, the publisher pops up and thank goodness they say, this is a 3-book deal. We want 3 in a series. And you kind of go, oh, that's interesting, because now I've got to actually give these characters you know, some longevity and some real life. And then at the end of that, they kind of go, we want 3 more. And at that point you're going, did I leave myself the space in their life to make them continually interesting? And also, I'm fiercely aware of that thing about series that go on too long. And you know that point where your character has nearly died 18 times and they've kind of saved the president of the United States 18 times. And at that point, you're kind of, any viewer it's like the whole, you know, it's like the 24 TV series, right? At that point, you're going, come on.
Yeah.
And so I am slightly aware when I'm writing these now that the variety has to be, you know, both in their emotional lives and in terms of the kind of things they do, that there's only so far you can take it. And you're constantly watching that you don't tip over into the realm of the utterly ridiculous.
No shark jumping.
Not the shark, yeah.
But I mean, your books are, I mean, you have an incredible imagination. I would be quite scared if I didn't know how lovely you were. I'd probably be quite scared by you, because some of the things I have been reading the books, and I really be like, oh my God, no. And honestly, that visceral reaction of, I cannot believe that this person wrote this and this came out of your mind. Some of your bad guys are really, really bad. Where does that come from? Because you're so sweet.
Or is she?
My husband. I don't know. I think I get all my demons out onto the paper, you know, and you know, nothing inside my imagination, nothing in any book scares me. The news scares me. Real life scares me. what people are genuinely capable of scares me. And so the stuff I write and these things don't have any impact on me at all. You know, I came from a background as a reader of loving horror. And so the stuff I write is probably very much on that border. I think at one point I strung a librarian up to the ceiling of a library and I peeled bits of him. When we went to, this is public, we went, it was nothing rude. That sounded awful. But, you know, kind of, there are things I did. And actually early on in the series, and I look back now, I got, you know, I kind of get, that was, you know, that was fairly visceral. But
I have to say the peeling skin.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that really got me, that I went, oh, it's not as it is. And it is, but that's what makes it so compelling. It's what made it so compelling for me as a reader and wanting to turn the page, because you're like, where is this going to go? How are we going? You know, and it's the fact, it's probably like you, Simon, I think like all crime writers, we're not just there writing the crime, we're writing the psychology a wee bit behind, and you know, you do get an understanding of why these people do these absolutely horrific things. And maybe that's the scary bit, I suppose.
It's not the what, it's the why, isn't it? And I think that's always what fascinates me, is the darkness. And then you know, I suppose when I was doing I did a serial killer thing, and I just read loads and loads about serial killers, which is dark in itself. But you kind of going, how does that happen? How does a human being get to the point where they want to go and kill 20 people and bury them and do stuff to them? It's fascinating. I know it's dark and horrible, but also it is fascinating. And that's what I like about.
Absolutely. I have to say, I agree. It's that getting into those shades of dark and light, and is that within us all?
Yes.
You know, that's exactly the scary thing. I'm seeing a few wee questions popping up at the side of the page. So I have somebody, they're anonymous here. Which character has given you the most trouble to write? Simon, do you have a character who you would just love to throw out a window in all senses?
I have a character called Georgie, who's a young female police officer in my Snowdonia series, she's trouble. I actually quite like writing her, but she's kind of quite ambitious, and she's quite promiscuous, and she's brilliant fun to write, but she's trouble. So I kind of know that when she goes into certain stuff that she's going to stir things up, because most of my characters are kind of flawed, but sort of emotionally kind of flawed, whereas she's quite sort of, I don't know, confrontational. So she definitely gives me trouble, but I quite enjoy it.
Sounds like a fun character to write. I love those kind of characters where you know they're in control. You're not in control as a writer. They're leading it up. And what about you, Helen? Because
I was going to say, what about you, Claire? Because you know, kind of because they're all standalones, you don't have that time to delve into them with such regularity.
The hardest character, the hardest and the easiest, I feel like I'm parroting Simon, was probably in the nurse, and the character that we know as him, because he was great. He was brilliant to write. He is a character who we don't know who he is. We just know that he is a young man who's disillusioned, who's getting caught up in the online world of incels. And it was problematic for me to write because he's obviously quite misogynistic, and some of the things he says and some of the fantasies he has and things like that are very, very disturbing. So as a woman to write that made me deeply uncomfortable. But in terms of building him as a character, he was great to build as a character. But yeah, I had a few sleepless nights wondering about how right it was to write him. But at the end of the day, this is happening in the world. These things are going on. So I couldn't water it down. And that said, it was probably all fairly kind of calm compared to peeling librarians hanging from ceilings. But
somebody online has just said, Helen, I'm eating. So I think maybe don't talk about peeling everyone.
I thought that was a brilliant, as a man reading your book and reading the him character, it was fascinating, because I kind of swung between feeling utterly ashamed to be a man, and then you were very, very clever, because it was a slow burn, so that when he first starts off, there's part of stuff that he was saying, I was going, actually, that's an interesting point as a man in society, the society at this moment, and then he comes up with stuff that is really completely twisted, and I'm going, no, that's completely wrong. But it was interesting as a man reading a book that was written by you, and obviously by the end he was like, he was insane and dark and disgusting and twisted. But when it first started, it was really interesting going backwards and forwards between the debate in his head as a male.
That's it. And I think you have a lot of maybe vulnerable young men out there feeling very disillusioned in the world we're in, and you're getting caught up in a community online that is telling you, this we're behind you, we're backing you, you're great, and how easy that is to believe and to thrive off that when you're feeling disillusioned elsewhere. I think, going back to Helen's point, it's the things that are happening in the real world that are the scary things. At least when we're writing, we're in control of the narrative. I don't think you wouldn't be able to write if you weren't in control of it. That's what makes it not scary. But he's an interesting one. But Helen, we still haven't heard who your troublesome character is.
Do you know, I honestly can't. When I wrote The Shadow Man, I wrote a bit like yours, Claire. I wrote a guy who suffered from walking corpse syndrome, which is a real thing. And it's where people genuinely believe that they are already dead. So they think they don't need to breathe air. They think they don't need to eat. They think they don't need to drink. And they believe that, I'm so sorry, whoever said, Helen, I'm eating, I'm just about to make this worse. So I apologize now. They quite often believe their organs are rotting inside themselves. And I had to write from the perspective of a man who honestly already believed he was dead. So therefore it didn't matter what he did to anyone else because there wouldn't be consequences. But also he was still trying to kind of fight through and find a way to, leave the world as a dead person. He couldn't understand why he couldn't leave the world if he was dead. And that got quite complicated.
Imagine, yeah.
Great fun to write, and it's real. It's all a real syndrome. So reading some of the case notes on actually recorded cases of that was interesting.
I bet that one was really creepy. That was really, really. I recommend it to everybody to read it, but keep the light on. Definitely, it will give you the heebie-jeebies. Laura Hamilton is asking, have you ever acted out a scene to help with the writing process? Hopefully none of the more gruesome scenes, but have you ever? Do you make up character voices? Do you have conversations with yourself?
I walk in places that I'm writing about. That's not quite the same, but if I drive somewhere, I'll go, this looks like that place where they were sitting outside the farm. And then I'll get out and make notes, because there's always, me as a writer, there'll be little details that I'd never get just sitting in a room. So there'll be like, rusting farm machinery or whatever it might be, or someone doing something. So that helps me. But yeah, I think if I start putting on voices, I get arrested. So I probably best that I take my notepad and wander around.
Don't be walking around spooky scenes talking to yourself about murder. It might not go down too well.
No, but I did that on the Dark Tide. There's the whole thing. A lot of it's set on one of those cruise ships that goes from Beaumaris out to Puffin Island on Anglesey. And when I started to research and write it, I thought, well, I've never been on one, and I obviously have to go on one. So we did a quick research trip there. And I spent everyone else was looking at the puffins, and I was spending most of it looking around the boat, working out where people could hide, where the flare guns were, where the lifeboats were kept, and all the other stuff. And I think I must have looked very odd, because everyone's going, why is that man not looking at the puffins? And why is he kind of looking at the seats? And
you were probably scaring them, Simon. What do we have on this boat? What about you, Helen? What?
Definitely when I was writing the first book, when I was writing Perfect Remains, there's a scene where a unconscious victim is pulled along in a carry suitcase, and we actually went and bought one so I could figure out how big the suitcase needed to be and if you could get an adult female. And I made my husband, he didn't take a lot of persuading, he thought it was hilarious, shove me kind of slightly, unconsciously into a wheelie case and do the whole thing up and pull me, because this case has to be pulled along a gravel path, and pull me around the house in a done up wheelie case. to see, first of all, if the wheels would give in, or if it was possible. So, because I was giving precise dimensions, so seeing how big it needed to be. So yes, I do the technical bits of it. I act out quite often, actually. That's just one example, but I'm a bit bonkers, so I do that all the time. Claire, you?
Your husband must love it when you come into a room and go, look, do you know what we're doing tomorrow? We're going to buy a suitcase and you're going to stuff me in it and wheel me around the house. Yeah.
And you trusted him to let you out.
Yeah, no, he doesn't know. I took a little knife in with me just in case he just
Just in case.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm like Simon. I like to go to the places and I'm writing about and sort of walk around them a lot and maybe multiple times while I'm writing the book back and forth, just to get that sort of feel and the atmospheric side of it. And I suppose I do have conversations with myself, but only when I'm alone and, in the house, and the conversation batters back and forward. I find when I'm writing, the characters are in my head. They take over everything. I almost take on their personality at times, it feels like. If they're having a bad day, I'm going to be having a bad day. If things are going well, I'm going to be in great form. If they're feeling particularly murderous, my children just need to stay really far out of the way. So I suppose we do act them out in some way, but I've never been tempted to get a suitcase or anything like that. But I have looked around. I do play that game. I know I've mentioned this before, like game. My children, they do have normal childhood, honestly, but I do play that game anytime we're out walking. It's like they now play it with me. This would be a great place to find a body, or this would be a great place to hide a body, or whatever else. So they now instinctively know that's what we do anytime we're out. And even my sister comes out walking the dogs with me in the morning, and she's now started playing it as well. The problem is, I think sometimes when you're a crime writer, then you sort of automatically, because you're aware of where are good places to hide bodies and find bodies and whatever else, you sort of expect nearly to see them out of the side of your eyes all the time, and you can sort of scare yourself going out in the early morning walks when it's still a wee bit dark. I have freaked myself out a few times, I have to say. Our minds are dangerous, scary places.
Yeah, we were driving down the road the other day and there was like a pack. I was driving down the road the other day and there's a package on the side of plastic and it was kind of swirling around in the wind. And my first instant thing was, it's a body. And then I just, 2 seconds later, I went, well, it's clearly not. It's just someone's like fly tip something. But yeah, my head went straight into, and what if that was a body and who's dumped it? And so
that's it.
It's
brilliant though when your mind just starts from something like that. Driving down the road, seeing a bit of rubbish on the side of the road, that your mind just automatically starts making up a whole new set of circumstances and a whole new story. I don't know, I love daydreaming and disappearing off into different worlds, so that works really well for me. We have another Facebook user again. Unfortunately, we don't have a name beside them, who is asking, out of any of your characters, who would you most like to go for a meal with? And what would you ask them over dinner? So Helen, is it Luke? It has to be Luke.
It's not Luke.
No?
It's Superintendent Overbeck, also known as the evil Overbitch by the men in her squad. But she is the most hilarious character. She's the only one. I've always said this. If it's ever made into a TV series, I want to get to play her. She is absolutely awful and vicious, and she has zero filter, and she is utterly cutting, and really, really good fun to write. And those people who you don't want to be their enemy. But being around them and listen to them kind of doing that stuff is kind of really fascinating. So I'd want to go for a drink with her. What about you two?
Oh gosh, Simon, have you somebody for? I'm like, I know. I suppose I would like to go with Ingrid Devlin. Is my Lance Proudfoot. She's my journalist that appears through my books, and I was a former journalist. I would like to sit and chat with her because she's really sort of, she does have a heart of gold, but she does lack certain ethical boundaries when it comes to getting a story, and she would do anything, sell her granny, whatever, to get that scoop. And I would love to sit down and chat with her. And I suppose, even though I've created her as a character and I know who she is, I would love to ask her, does she have any regrets about how far she went to get any of her stories? Because obviously when you push those ethical boundaries, it can have consequences, not just for yourself, but for other people. So I think that would be a fascinating one to ask her. I might ask her that in a future book, actually. Should be a good one.
I think I would, I created a sort of a Liverpudlian sort of gang lord, drug lord called Curtis Blake, who's loosely based on someone that's real. But I also wrote, as one of my novellas, was a kind of origin story for him. So I kind of know him really well. And he's kind of known from the time he was a kid stealing cars all the way up to now. And he's kind of, Nick is my sort of sidekick for Ruth, the main character. And they have this kind of ongoing feud through the series, which is now kind of escalated in the last couple of books. But I think he's like, Curtis is incredibly interesting, and he's got a very interesting life, and he's been around the world, and he's been to Colombia and done drug deals out there and stuff. I just think, yeah, it'd be quite, interesting evening in his brains about what he's been up to.
Yeah, a bit good research. If you could find a crime lord to go out for dinner with you and for you and research.
Why not?
I do know of writers that have gone and sort of met with really, really horrible, dark people, and to, in a pub, to chat to them about their past. And I don't know, I would be terrified, because I would say the wrong thing. I would automatically, and not in a even insulting them way, just in a really stupid way, and they would just, it would be hugely embarrassing. So we see Lindsay Lynn is asking, all three of you are fabulous writers. Thank you, Lindsay. But who is your go-to writer to read? I suppose, Simon, we can't get away with saying Helen this time. Well, maybe we can. But Helen, who do you pick up when you you're going to get a great story out of?
Diane Setterfield, who wrote The 13th Tale and Bellman and Black and Once Upon a River and that sort of thing. So it's kind of historical, but always with a kind of slightly crime-ish heart. Brilliant. Just a storyteller. Not, I mean, a great plot and everything else, but just that old-fashioned sense of how to weave a tale and just gently pull you along until you've read 300 pages and you didn't realize. So yeah, it's always, I never miss one of her books.
Simon? Oh, see, for me, because I write in different genres, I suppose I have my go-to crime writers, and then I have my go-to women's fiction, commercial fiction writers. So crime writers, I know if I pick up a book by Helen or by Jane Casey, or by Brian McGilloway, I'm going to get a really good read. It's going to keep me turning the page right until the very end, and I'm going to be really invested in those characters and the All Right series. So I do sort of, as the books go, and I love seeing the character development, not just for your main characters, but for the characters that are off at the side as they grow and come more to the fore. I love that. And in terms of the women's fiction stuff and going into like just knowing a really, really good storyteller, for me, it's Marion Keyes. Because she can write over really, really dark, emotional topics, domestic abuse or addiction or whatever else, but you're going to laugh and you're not going to feel you're being preached to. And it's I just know, I'm guaranteed when I pick up one of her books that it's going to be a joy. So those are my absolute go-tos. Simon?
I always read crime because I don't really get any other genre, but I normally switch countries. So if I've been reading British stuff and obviously writing my stuff, which is British based, I then go to America. So I love Michael Connelly just because it's like proper kind of, it's got that kind of LA noir kind of Raymond Chandler thing going on. and it's very kind of it's a very kind of clipped style, but I love it, and I just love it. It kind of feels a bit more glamorous. And I love Karen Slaughter. I think she's amazing. Yeah, I just kind of I'll read something, but I'll read it. I quite like jumping and going into a different place, or I'll go and read something sort of some Nordic noir or something. So it's more about geographical change rather than genre change.
It is brilliant that you can get insight into all different, I suppose, legal systems and laws, and you travel the world and you've not left your chair, which has been very handy for the last couple of years, to be honest.
I think the cultural things that when you're reading a book that's set in Scandinavia or even America, it's that kind of the tiny little minutiae of the day-to-day living that is so sometimes really different to the way we do. So you kind of get a glimpse into a very different kind of culture, different landscape. However, I kind of get the bonus that there's some kind of crime whodunit to kind of hang it on. I quite like that. I quite like the sort of juxtaposition of those two things.
So it's good to have a puzzle to try and solve. Now, going back to both your previous careers, Simon, you worked in TV, and for a lot of people, they go, that must be the best job ever. I'm delving a wee bit into some TV work at the minute. There's not many people go from TV to novels. Normally it's the other way around. Do you prefer writing novels to TV, or is it just two very different things, and let's see what opportunities come next?
I kind of got burnt out by it, really. So I found that the people in TV were a very different breed of people than publishing. Everyone I've met in publishing, whether it's writers or editors or just being lovely people. And it sort of surprised me when I first got there, because having worked in TV where not everyone is lovely and there are some very large egos hanging around, I sort of expected publishing to be the same, and it's really not. So it's been a breath of fresh air. Because I was working for TV series that were factory, like, the bill and stuff like that. It kind of churns it out. So you end up not writing. You get given a brief about what episode you're going to write and what needs to be in there roughly, and you get a bit of creativity. But for me, the idea of sitting down and writing, of me being in control and saying, right, this is my story, these are my characters, this is how the plot goes, this is how I want to write it. And touch wood, so far, working either on my own stuff or with Avon, it's been, I'm allowed to kind of write what I want, and that's a real gift. So that's why I continue with it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to be said for creative control, and just being able to write something that you love and enjoy the actual process of putting words onto a page. That's what does it for me anyway. And Helen, you were very glam. I know I'm saying very glam. I've sat in many, many, many courts during my time as a journalist, and I know it's not all that glam. And there's lots of just sitting around, and there's lots of legal argument that goes on forever, and it's very, very intense. What made you step away from the law and to this lovely creative world that we're in?
Well, I had a break in the meantime. So I left being a barrister really because 60-hour weeks, wasn't seeing my children at all, self-employed, so no sick pay, no holiday pay, no maternity pay, all the rest of it. And I was just a bit of a shell, to be honest with you. And I decided to make the break. And then I worked for my husband's media firm as a producer, and a sort of client handler, and going out on set and things for a few years. But I'd always wanted to try my hand at writing. So I finally got the time and the space to do that. But yes, a barrister is not a glamorous job. It's just, you go in and out of prisons, and you're in and out of cells in courts, and people occasionally spit at you or threaten you, or whichever side you're on, prosecuting or defending, somebody always hates you. People think you earn vast amounts of money, which you don't. People think you don't really care and it's just a game, and you do care and it's not a game. There's a lot of misconceptions about barristers. So I think you spend half your time fighting people who think you're a bad guy. And it's a very high pressure job, because every day that you're doing that job, someone's relying on you. And I loved it and I miss it. But it was crazy hard work. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you have a creative background? You know, you said you worked for your husband for a little bit, but before you wrote your first novel, you know, we hear a lot of people talking about, do you have to go and get a master's degree in creative writing? Do you have to spend your days in creative writing classes to become a writer? So what was your process of becoming a writer?
I picked up a laptop and I sat down and started writing a book.
Mm.
And the truth is that those sorts of courses, you know, the Curtis Brown course or that sort of thing, what they do is if you do them well and you're successful, it's a much easier route towards an agent and a publishing deal. It doesn't teach you how to write.
Mm-hmm.
You have either got some of that kind of creativity and flair, or not. But the other thing that it takes to be a writer is just a huge amount of discipline, and you know, the effort it takes to start writing a book and to finish it. I don't know how many people I've met who I've written, you know, I've started writing a book, and
Mm-hmm.
you kind of, in a very gentle way, kind of go, that's absolutely brilliant. The test of whether or not you're a writer is whether or not you just get to the end. It doesn't have to be brilliant. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be perfect first time. Doesn't matter. No one cares. But what it takes to become a writer is to be able to start something and get our way through to the end. So I think discipline. I think what I had was maybe not an innate creativity or an, you know, understanding of how the process worked. I knew nothing about publishing, but I did understand what it took to work, you know, that many hours.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to stick to deadlines and keep pushing yourself. And if you're feeling ill or if you don't feel like it, whatever, that's completely irrelevant. So that's what my career gave me, apart from a knowledge of criminal justice system, that sort of thing. But I was used to working really hard in long bursts. And that stayed with me, I think. Claire, I mean, you know, you were a
Yeah.
journalist. You were used to deadlines. You were used to difficult working conditions.
That's it. So yeah, and that's probably the same with Simon and working in TV. When you're used to working to deadlines and sometimes, you know, very, very pressurized, and you have an awful lot of work to get through in a very, very short time, because the nature of breaking news is you could be half an hour away from a print time and something could happen, and your publication still has to reflect that there's been a major news event. So that definitely set me up for it, and that discipline of sitting down and writing every day, and it gave me a love for the written word as well. So that did work. But a bit like yourself too, you know, people sometimes think journalism is a bit of, you know, glam job. It's not. And much like being a barrister, no matter what you do, somebody's going to hate you for it and somebody's going to love you for it, and you're never going to quite get it right, and you're working against stereotypes all the time, and it's quite draining. And I imagine, like, working in the law as well, you hear and you see things that are really disturbing and upsetting, and it's real people and it's real life, and that has an impact. That's an impact you can carry into your writing in terms of that, those feelings and those emotions. But it's why I like being in control, I think, of the story now, rather than the story controlling me.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to write really horrible things happening and tragedy and whatever else when I'm pulling the strings. It's something else when you don't quite know what you're going out to and what you're going to see. And make believe grief is a lot easier to write than real grief. So, you know, so it definitely gave me the background to become a writer and a disciplined writer.
I think
But
you need the same
much
discipline and hard work. It's that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure TV
Much
is.
that it is as creativity, I think, because you can be highly creative and really great at writing, but if you can't sit down and write 2,000-3,000 words a day or whatever it is, or write a 70,000 word book, it doesn't. That's not going to happen, isn't it? You do need the combination of it.
That's it.
And I was very lucky, I think, because working on those really big things like The Bill and EastEnders, your turnaround time is so fast that you haven't got time to be kind of like oh, well, I'm being really creative. It's like, we don't care. You've got to rewrite that script in 48 hours because we're shooting it on Thursday, and we've changed this and this, and you just have to do it. And so you get very used to kind of flying very sort of like working in, as Helen was saying, big sort of very hard creative bursts, and then handing it over, and
and then it can just be completely turned around. I mean, I've seen how scripts, the series that I've been working as a story consultant on a new drama series coming to BBC, and I've seen the difference between the first draft scripts and the final scripts, and how they can just turn around multiple times, more than a novel ever could, and just the constant rewriting, even up to it has gone, in front of the camera, and even when it's in front of the camera, that's not working. Let's rework it. So yeah, it takes having a thick skin too, doesn't it, Simon? Like, you have to just.
That's why I stopped doing it, because actually what ends up happening is that you'll have producers and actors and people on the set changing what you think is a decent scene, and you watch it go out and you go, that's not, maybe I was being arrogant, but I just thought that's not as good as the thing that I wrote, and you changed it. You haven't run it past me, because that's not how it works on those series. And eventually it just becomes quite disheartening. So although on the outside it's like this is a really glamorous job writing scripts for those, when you start doing it kind of day in, day out, it becomes your job. The writers aren't very high up in the sort of priority order of things on TV. They're pretty low down.
Yeah, but we are still, I think we should have like a stressful job support group. But we are still, we are really, really privileged to do what we do, and to be putting the books out that we are. And I think being able to write as we're writing gives us greater control. Well, you can control so much. You can control the story, which is the big thing. Everything else, who's going to read it and everything, I suppose, is out of your hands. But you just keep working and persisting and hoping for the best. And it's a bit like Helen, you said that, having the dedication to keep writing. It's having the dedication to keep redrafting and keep learning and moving on is hugely important as well. We have a few more comments coming through. Are there any of your books being adapted for TV? That is from Lindsay again, talking TV. Simon, there's a question. If your books were to be adapted for TV, would you like to work on scripting those novels, or have you just stepped away from that altogether?
They've been optioned, so the ball's rolling already with the Snowdonians. So we have there's a famous actress attached, there's a script writer attached, there's 3 different production companies attached. So it's kind of well, we're getting there.
Can you reveal any of the details?
Oh, I don't think I don't think I'm allowed to.
No, it's all very quiet.
So it's moving ahead. They've asked me if I'd like to write scripts further down the line, as I have a script background. I won't get to write the pilot, and I said I would be interested. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of me that kind of the idea of actually going back to one of my books and then writing a script for it sort of 2 years later. I don't know whether I particularly want to do that. I suppose it depends on how the series goes. So,
but at least you're driving it by writing the story in the first place.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Helen, what about you? I know you would I would love to see your books on the screen, and we've had these conversations. I would love to see Luke and Ava on a nice big series. Have we had any wee bites from anybody yet?
It was option to start with, so the option was held for a couple of years. It's actually technically a difficult thing with setting them in Scotland, because lots of production companies find it hard because they're looking to export to a global audience. So if you get lots and lots of strong accents, it limits the global audience, which is, I think, and then when you put a French guy in as well. Also, they just can't find anyone good looking enough to play Luke.
Well, if we ever find that man, just put him in a suitcase, hide him in your back room or something. And
what about you, Claire? Are you allowed to tell us anything about what you've been working on?
Well, it's one of those. It's a bit of, anybody that works in this industry knows that things get optioned and things get made and things don't get made, and it's all a very long waiting process. So The Liar's Daughter has been optioned by Hat Trick Productions, and it's in development with them. And I have been working with them. They would ideally like me to work on script and that. And I've been working with their their head of scripted content for Northern Ireland, who is also one of the producers with Blue Lights, which is the BBC series that I've been doing story consultation with the brilliant Declan Lawn and Allan Patterson, who just wrote Rogue Agent, that's just been on Netflix, and they wrote The Salisbury Poisonings.
Oh, wow.
So they're absolutely fantastic and brilliant to work with, and they're sort of teaching me a few wee things. And then The Nurse is with an American production company at the moment, and we'll see what happens. But I think as long as I get to keep writing new stories, I'm happy enough as I am. What is next for either of you? Simon, what, another 10 books by this time next year, or?
I just had to map out next year. So book 2 of the Anglesey series comes out in January, but that's written and done. Book 3 I'm writing now for Anglesey, and then another X number of the Snowdonia killings, probably 3.
So just keep going. And Helen, are we back to Luke and Ava after this one, or?
No, we're not. We're not. So I've written the next one. So the next book comes out on the 1st, 2nd of March. That's a hardback called The Institution. And for anybody who read The Shadow Man and first met Dr. Connie Woolwine, of the very blunt, slightly odd character, she's coming back, and she's going to be undercover in a high security prison hospital ward with a bunch of serial killers, trying to figure out which one of them killed a nurse. So it's a kind of locked room-ish kind of mystery. I love Connie. She's so totally, utterly strange. She's great to write. So I've finished that one. So I'm just putting together my outline for the book that will come in March 2024. And that will be about women who fall in love with serial killers when they're serving a life sentence.
Love it. Brilliant. And I just plugged that my next book is called In the Dark, and it's going to be released in Ireland and ebook in January, and it surrounds a missing child. Historical, or from 7 years ago, a child has gone missing. Her mother walked into the woods with her. Only the mother walked out, and she doesn't remember what happened. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I've just seen that our time is up, folks. I would like to thank everybody for coming along, for asking brilliant questions. We didn't get to all of them. Particularly lovely to chat with Simon once again, and Helen, who I'm a complete fangirl of. And Helen, we wish you all the very, very, very best.
Thank you. Thank you.
The last girl to die. Lovely to chat to you both.
Lovely to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.